Wow, what a gospel. The accountability part, the debt part, the torture part, the throwing into the lake of fire. We didn't use that language, but we might as well have, right? The message loud and clear is forgive. It is so hard. It is so hard to forgive. I come from Kentucky in the mountains. That's where I was born, in Pike County. Marty Robbins, who's a country singer, has a saying that nobody can hold a grudge like a hillbilly. The Hatfields and McCoys came from the county I was born in. And this sense of grudge making and grudge keeping is in my bones, and it's in my family system. I don't think I ever heard my parents say, "I'm sorry." I bet I'm not alone in this room. It is hard to acknowledge wrongdoing. It is hard to claim the wrongdoing we have done. It is hard. That's why prayer is so important in the act of forgiveness. I don't know about you, but over the summer, as we were praying the prayers of the people from the Iona community, and we had that petition to help us forgive the people that we are resenting, whom we name aloud at this, silently, because you don't name it aloud because you wouldn't want to, right? They may be sitting here. That was a heavy prayer. I had to think hard about, who am I hating? Who am I having a hard time forgiving? Where is that rigidity in my own heart? In the gospel lesson today, Jesus tells this parable about the king with the slaves. And the slave who owes him like $1 million, that's the way we'll translate that, 10,000 talents. It is more money than he could ever hope to pay. And like in America, our history of slavery, one of the ways you make good on debts that you cannot pay is you sell wives and children, and you separate families. That is part of our debt structure in our country. It was so in the Roman Empire as well. The guy can't pay $1 million, so the king says, "I'm going to sell your family to make good on this debt." And the horror of that smacks the slave, and he asks for mercy. "I can't do it. Extend mercy to me." And the king does. It's all wiped away. We know that experience of liberation from economic debt. Some of us are recipients of debt forgiveness for student loans. There was a little window. Some of us now are feeling the pain and the pall of student debt coming due again as the government is lifting the forgiveness and mercy. We have big debates in our country about whether that kind of mercy should be extended, and we would have those opinions in this room, no doubt. But the pain of economic debt and the weight of it was what led the United States to create the bankruptcy laws that we have now. People needed to have a chance to be forgiven of economic burden and to start anew. Bankruptcy was originally a form of mercy. It's being used in novel ways now. This act of mercy was powerful for this slave. He experienced freedom, but he also is a big hypocrite, because no sooner has he received mercy than he confronts someone who owes him $100. And rather than being able to offer forgiveness to that debtor, he puts his foot on his neck and throws him into prison until he can pay it. This injustice is also part of the dynamic of forgiveness. Justice and forgiveness, justice and mercy are always the left hand and right hand of God. You can't have justice without mercy. In our system, we are forgetting that balance, whether we're looking at the way we run bond, if you're imprisoned, or if we look at impeachment or white-collar crime. What does that look like? What does justice and mercy look like? Well, it doesn't look like what this guy was doing. His fellow slaves are like, this is not just. And they go back to the king and they say, this guy got all this mercy from you, and he is a schmuck, and he is not forgiving the one who owed him $100. The injustice of that leads the king to react and respond. And the action is powerful, which is a sign of how seriously Jesus takes debt and forgiveness. I think we get tripped up if we think so much about the hell piece of this. The point is accountability for whether we have extended mercy and forgiveness. But the dynamic of forgiveness is really hard. It is hard to acknowledge when we have done wrong, and it does not mean that we forget what has happened. Forgiveness is not denial. We're acknowledging the evil, the wrong, the hurt, the pain, the brokenness that has led to our feeling. True forgiveness can only take place if there's truth-telling. This happened. I did this. It's a radical form of honesty that leads us into forgiveness. It's also not quick. Forgiveness is not cheap grace where we just say, oh, it's okay. Because sometimes forgiveness takes years. The deeper the cut, the longer it may take. Those of us who are survivors of sexual abuse know that. Those of us who have been perpetrators of that abuse know that. It can take a long time. Forgiveness also doesn't mean happy, clappy reconciliation. You may never be able to be reconciled with the one you forgive. It doesn't mean that you have to maintain relationship with that person. But it also doesn't mean you hold on to the resentment. Resentment, anyone in a 12-step program can tell you, is like acid on the heart and mind. It keeps you looking in the rear view mirror constantly, valuing what happened, blaming the people in the past, rehearsing what went wrong. Annie Lamont, a kind of contemporary theologian, talks about resentment as drinking rat poison and expecting the rats to die. You drink the poison, the rats don't die. That resentment only poisons you. So letting go, releasing that backward motion is part of the act of forgiveness. It also leads to freedom. If we can let go, we can look forward. We don't have to be bound by what has happened. But coming to that process may be very challenging. So I was thinking about, where have I been holding resentment? I have resentment against HEB. I have held spite in my heart against HEB for 10 years. I have boycotted them. I've boycotted them because they crossed us on their alcohol permit at St. Stephen's School. And I have not shopped there for 10 years, until lately. And then it's only through Bruce because cat food is 11 cents cheaper on the can. I think I may have to give up my resentment toward HEB. Just saying. But the harder pieces, I think, and some of the hardest forgiveness is toward ourselves. Errors that we have made, recriminations that we hold, decisions that we've had, feelings we can't let go of. One of the most palpable ones for me happened when I was carrying my first child, Max, and my water broke. And I didn't know that my water had broken. And I walked around for 2 days not knowing that my water had broken. And Max developed sepsis upon birth. Sepsis is a blood infection that can be very lethal. I felt horrible. How could I do that to my child? The recrimination was just over and over in me. But being the Christian person that I am and the priestly kind of person, I knew that I needed to get on that immediately. Otherwise, my guilt as a mother would be unrelenting. That's the kind of guilt you carry your whole life. So I called a friend of mine who's a priest. And she came, and we did the rite of reconciliation in the prayer book. Now, for those of you who come out of a tradition that doesn't have confession, individual confession, coming into the Episcopal Church and knowing that that's a resource may feel really weird, and to quote you, Steve, Catholic light. Because we don't make a big deal about having to do reconciliation. But it is a powerful tool of forgiveness. I was able to invite that friend who is a priest, and sometimes you can confess to a priest or you can confess to a friend, but the act of confession, of saying it out loud, enables you to forgive yourself and to hear the words of God's forgiveness. I was able to name my fear and my sense of responsibility and to let it go, and to focus on bonding with my child. Parenting is complicated enough without thinking that you've caused your child irreparable damage. Forgiving ourselves, letting go, and looking forward is a huge spiritual challenge. And yet it is essential if we are to put on Christ, if we are to live fully into the life that God intends for us. It's an act of transformative justice for ourselves and for others. Nadia Bolz-Weber is an author and Lutheran minister. And I'd like to quote from her on forgiveness as an act of freedom. Maybe retaliation or holding on to anger about the harm done to me doesn't actually combat evil. Maybe it feeds it. Because in the end, if we're not careful, we can actually absorb the worst of our enemy and at some level start to become them. So what if forgiveness, rather than being a pansy way to say, it's okay, is actually a way of wielding bolt cutters and snapping the chains that link us? What if it's saying, what you did was not okay, I refuse to be connected to it anymore? Forgiveness is about being a freedom fighter, and a free people are dangerous people. Free people aren't controlled by the past. Free people laugh more than others. Free people see beauty where others do not. Free people are not easily offended. Free people are unafraid to speak truth to stupid. Free people are not chained to resentments, and that's worth fighting for. We're challenged to be freedom fighters and seeking freedom for ourselves and those around us. So I want to challenge you today to contemplate where you are holding resentments, where you are chained to the one that you resent. And I want to invite you to pull out those bolt cutters and to be free. Amen.